Well, good. Welcome again. And today we have Joe Vanderweer, who is, I'll let him introduce himself and explain his background a little bit. And he's going to be talking to us about the 1599 Geneva Bibles. So Joe, first, who are you? And then explain things to us.
Okay, let me see if I can get the screen sharing thing figured out. How's that? Hopefully you can see what I see now. All right, my name is Joe Vanderweer. I'm an antique Bible dealer, purveyor of antiquarian Bibles. We specialize in English Bibles from the Protestant Reformation. And what I want to talk with you about a little bit today is the 1599 Geneva Bible. And in particular, you'll notice that there are two title pages up here on the screen. One of them is The Real McCoy, and the other one is An Imposter. And I hope that by the end of the presentation today, you will be able to distinguish for yourself the difference between a real 1599 and a pirated 1599 version. The story of the 1599 Geneva Bible is really actually a microcosm of the story of the Geneva Bible in general. And so we'll quickly follow its rise to fame, and we'll discuss the factors that led to its eventual downfall and its replacement by the King James Version. All of the Bible images in this presentation originate from Bibles that we either currently have in inventory or we've handled within the last few years, with a couple of exceptions that we wouldn't be able to handle, like maybe an early Tyndale or Coverdale. And you can always view our extensive selection of Bibles on our website. There's my little shameless plug. There's our website right there. So the proliferation of the English Bible and its printing during the 16th century, as you know, probably depended largely on which monarch ruled England at the time. So you've got a little image here of kind of a timeline of various English Bibles as they were printed from 1526 to 1611. And you've got the monarchs up here. I give credit to this term of first generation English Bibles to Michael Morgan, because I think it really thank you, Michael. It really summarizes the first version Bibles printed in English quite well. And we have on the left here, young Edward, known as Boy King, who saw himself as a Josiah of sorts, becoming king at a young age and also eager to return the scriptures to the people. We are here on this timeline in 1547, right around here. And during this time, a vast amount of versions are being reprinted, including Tyndale's New Testament, Coverdale Bibles, Matthew's Bibles, Great Bibles, and Taverner Bibles as well. And upon Edward's sudden death, all of a sudden Mary ascends the throne and everything changes. There were no Bibles printed in England during Mary's reign, and she is eager to return England to Catholicism. And many Protestants, fearing for their lives, flee England and find refuge in Geneva. It is there in Geneva that Marian exiles and scholars complete a translation into English known as the Geneva Bible, which would become the dominant version for almost a century. The title page of the 1560 Geneva Bible, first edition, stands in sharp contrast to the authorized or licensed English Bibles that come before it. Rather than conveying pillars of establishment authority, the Geneva Bible title page invites the readers into the text. Geneva scholars and Marian exiles in Geneva chose a woodcut of the Red Sea, as you can see here, with God parting the waters to enable the Israelites to escape capture from the pursuing army of Pharaoh. There was a literal meaning here, obviously, that the exiles sought deliverance from the bondage and oppression by Bloody Mary. But I think there's also a figurative meaning, in a sense, that the Geneva Bible was really a step forward. It was designed to bring the Bible to the people in their homes. No longer were church and tradition valued, but an emphasis was on scripture alone. So the Bible was actually the first to be translated from the original languages completely, and it was studied with profitable annotations upon the hard places. God was parting the Red Sea and inviting Christians to read the Bible for themselves. The Geneva Bible was a big step forward. Open the Geneva Bible to any page, and you'll note that one of the stark contrasts to previous versions is you can know where you are. You've got verses that are numbered, chapter summaries provided. Each page is headlined with topic. Cross-references are located in the margins, and the famous notes allow one to understand the things that are hard, which are not difficult to apply per se, though that may be the case, but difficult to understand for someone who's never read the Bible before. Here, these numbers speak for themselves. So if you look at this table, you see the editions of English Bibles printed before the King James Version. Herbert's catalog lists a total of 144 different editions of the Geneva Bible. And there is a gentleman named Charles Eason who located at least 36 additional editions. And if you look to your right here, you see this is a picture of his little pamphlet, which I could only find in physical form, not a digital copy, and it is rather scarce, but it does pop up once in a while on the market. So grab it if you get a chance. He does an excellent job giving a good overview of the various editions. And if you look closely, you'll see under the year 1599 that he's got a number of different entries here under that purported year. And he also lists about 36 editions which are not located in Herbert. It's really hard for us to know exactly how many editions of the Geneva Bible were printed, because there were some that we know that were printed with just replacement title pages. But these numbers that we have here are on the conservative side of 180 different editions. If you use the number of editions alone and you consider a conservative print run of 2,000 Bibles per edition, which I definitely think is on the conservative side, that would be a total of 360,000 Geneva Bibles that were printed between 1560 and 1644, which just for sheer size, the numbers let you know just how popular this Bible really was. There were three main stages too of the Geneva Bible: the 1560 version, and then there was an updated 1576 Thompson's revision. In Thompson's revision, the study notes were updated and replaced, and a couple of changes occurred with a few words in the New Testament. And then in 1599, Junius's Revelation, which was a long commentary on the book of Revelation, was found in Bibles starting in the year 1601. And on the right here, you've got a picture of the first page of Revelation, and you can see all of Junius's commentary stuck into the margins. And if you look through and read the book of Revelation, you'll see that his commentary takes up almost as much space as the Bible text itself. Okay, now that sets the stage for what our main emphasis, which is the 1599 Geneva Bibles. And here there are two Geneva Bible title pages that have the same heart-shaped center, which you're probably familiar with, teardrop, heart-shaped, but there's a difference between the two. One was really printed in England and the other was printed abroad. And we can play a little game of spot the difference, which is much easier to do when they're side by side than when you're dealing with one Bible at a time. If you can spot it, feel free to speak up and let us know what you see. I know the date's different.
The one on the left does not look as nicely printed. I mean, it looks sort of crudely printed. That's just a observation looking at the screen.
Yeah, that's true.
Very bottom.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The very bottom.
Yes, the very bottom. So this is actually, this is why I use this program, so we could use this little cursor here. You can see that here at the very bottom, we've got a musical bar. And here on the very bottom on the right side, we have the words cum privilegio and the initials ER. So the one on the right was printed in England, London, and the left was not. And one of the reasons you can see that is you don't have that designation of cum privilegio, which is the idea of with being licensed. or authorized to print. And you don't have the initials ER, which is Elizabeth Regina or the Queen Elizabeth, because this Bible in particular was printed abroad. Here's the reported evidence. Do you have one, Jeff? Are you holding up a 1599? Nice. Is yours imported, or is it a true 1599?
So this was one of the main reasons I was looking forward to this today too, but I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but yes, unfortunately mine is the
Yes, it's the pirated version.
yes.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, a couple of common themes that give us a fair degree of confidence that the 1599s with the heart-shaped center are the pirated versions. One of them is, I didn't tell you this at the beginning, but I'm actually 100% Dutch. My parents are from the Netherlands, and we moved over from Holland when I was 10 years old. And I can attest to the fact that when my parents first started learning English, there was a lot of confusion with the TH sound. If you try to say TH, you have to do special tricks with your tongue, and the Dutch tend to say D instead. And there are numerous spelling errors in the 1599 pirated versions where that happens, where there's a D that is replaced for a TH and a T. Also, another little hint is that English and French binders, they ran their clasp catches. So our Bibles were frequently bound with clasps. Originally, that was to keep the vellum, which they were frequently bound in, from warping. But that common theme stayed with most Bibles into the 16th and 17th century of clasping them. But in England and France, they would run the clasp catches from the upper board to the lower, while Dutch and German binders would run them the other way around. So I have seen a number of 1599s that were spuriously dated where that was the case, where the clasp catches were running from the lower to the upper board. So that's not the go-to tell, because frequently, as you know, these Bibles were bound at a later date, perhaps in a different place, but there are a couple of Geneva Bibles that would be printed and bound immediately in Amsterdam. The 1599 Geneva Bibles that are the spuriously dated ones contain many errors, which simply an English speaker wouldn't make. Another note is that the Apocrypha was not included in these Bibles. And the reason for that is, in the Synod of Dort in 1617, if you were printing a Bible in Holland, you were not allowed to include the Apocrypha in it. Esther 1:1, if you look in Herbert's catalog, is like the go-to verse and chapter where you can determine which of the pirated 1599 Geneva versions you have. And if you, let's go back to this slide, we can see that there are, according to Eason, he reported about 8 or 9 of these various versions of different 1599 pirated Genevas that were printed at different dates in Amsterdam. And you can use this verse, Esther 1:1, to determine which one you've got, which is an interesting study. What you have here on the right is actually the famous Goose Bible, which is quite scarce even among the 1599 Geneva Bibles, because it was not printed in Amsterdam. It was printed in Dort. And the telltale sign for whether or not you've got that one, you have 2 things you want to look for. Number 1, notice that there is no date, no imprinted date on the title at all. It is like fill in your own dates. There's even a blank line for you to do that if you so desire. So there's that. And then the other telltale is there's actually a little symbol of a goose in the very back of the Bible. With the Book of Psalms, the metrical Psalter was almost always bound with these spuriously dated 1599 Geneva Bibles. And the title page of the metrical Psalter has a goose emblem on it. So if you run across one of those, they're quite rare. I've handled maybe 5 or 6 in my time of selling Bibles in 6 or 7 years. The 2 main components that contributed to the 1599 Geneva Bible one was political pressure. So James, when he took on the throne, he was opposed really to the anti-monarchical notes that he found in the Geneva Bible. He described the Bible as follows. See here, according to another source, William Barlow, the worst translated of all Bibles in English, and its notes were partial, untrue, seditious, and savoring of dangerous and treacherous conceits. we're not entirely sure whether or not the credibility of this source is, well, yeah, we're not entirely sure. William Barlow was not, he was definitely strongly Anglican, so perhaps the words were a little twisted. But an example, though, of the notes that James objected to was one note, for example, in Exodus 1:19 on midwives who didn't follow Pharaoh's command to kill the Israelites' boys, and states their disobedience was lawful, but their disassembling evil. And so James didn't really like the fact that here we have this idea of disobedience to someone in charge, an authoritative figure, that disobedience to that figure would be lawful. That did not sit well with him for obvious reasons, as he really felt that he was, a special human being representing a special relationship between himself and his patrons. On the final afternoon of the Hampton Court Conference, a Puritan leader, Dr. John Reynolds, suggested replacing the poorly received Bishop's Bible with a different translation. And this is the version that was released in 1611. After 1611, once the authorized version began to be printed, by 1616, James banned the printing of the Geneva Bible in England. And he did this with the aim of promoting his own version. So you'll see Geneva Bibles printed in England, starting in 1576, all the way through 1616, and then you find the last black letter quarto printed in 1616 in England. That's officially just from looking at the title pages. So with this political pressure, printers in Holland recognized this as an economic opportunity, and they became the sole source for Geneva Bibles that were imported into England after 1616. In 1634, Archbishop Laud actually banned the importation of the Geneva Bible. So by then, Geneva Bibles were already being imported into England. And it got to a point where Laud had to intervene and say, no more imported Geneva Bibles from abroad. And therefore, the Dutch made a clever idea of putting a different date on the title page so that when you brought these Bibles in, you could say, well, this is not a banned version. It's a 1599. I've had this for a long time. And so that's how they went around circumventing the ban and making their Geneva Bibles appear legal. A gentleman named Hugh Pope, he claims that as many as 150,000 copies were imported. And I have to say that is just such a large number, and I had no way of verifying. He didn't cite his source. So I'm not entirely sure where he came up with that number, but as far as we know, there were 9 different versions, and an estimated print run of 2,000 copies per version is about 20,000. We know that at least 20,000 or so were imported. The King James Bible, though, was not insisted on by authorities as the only Bible in the land. David Norton cites that Duncan Anderson, who suggests that if an attempt had been made to do that, to make it a King James Bible only country, the people probably would have rejected it. The irony of this is that Laud, who is the archbishop that banned the importation of the Geneva Bible, actually quotes the Geneva Bible in his sermons all the way until 1629. What we have on the right here is a 1599, spuriously dated 1599 Geneva Bible, which you can tell by the colophon there, 1599, but bound with metrical dated at 1606. This really often, and it's not that the Psalter was printed 40 years later and then they were bound together. It's very, very likely that this Bible was printed right around 1636, had a fake date of 1599, and then they were bound together. This Psalter almost becomes an integral part, the metrical Psalter becomes an integral part of the 1599 Geneva Bibles that have the fake title page. In addition to the political pressure, there was economic pressure in the land. And here's Laud's quote himself, where he makes it clear that there were so many Geneva Bibles coming over, and according to him, they were better in quality. The paper was better, the bindings were better, the printing was better. And not only were they better, they were cheaper. There was a gentleman named Michael Stark who was, and he imported many of these fake Bibles, and he actually accused the Barkers with commercial exploitation of their monopoly. They had a monopoly on printing, and he basically accused the Barkers of saying, hey, you guys are charging way too much for the Bibles that you're printing in England. And he talks about also the Geneva Bibles being imported and their quality being superior. So after 1611, the distinction between the King James Bible and the Geneva Bible among the readers is actually not so much contingent upon the textual differences in the translation itself, but when you read the writing that is contemporary to their time, they talk about with notes. The notes almost become the determining factor for them. They live marginal. As you know, they were so popular that they were placed in 8 editions of the King James Bible itself, from 1642 to 1715, 7 folio Bibles, and 2 of those folio Bibles actually were printed in the same year, 1642, that had Geneva notes printed on the side. Here's an example of a 1643 Geneva Bible that is folio size. This is King James text with Geneva marginal notes. The Geneva Bible was never sanctioned by the church, but we have a ton of evidence that it was frequently used without authority, both to read the lessons, to preach from, and it was definitely the preeminent household Bible that people were reading in their homes. And there's some question of whether or not these Geneva Bibles, the pulpit-sized folios and regular-sized folios, were even being read in churches. The other component of the economic pressure of it all, we talked about how the imported Bibles were somewhat cheaper and better quality. And part of the reason for that is the cost of the paper. So in order to make paper then, they used cotton rags. And you can see the cotton rag paper had these chain lines, which you can see here in the picture on the right. And the main ingredient for that was cotton. And the English, people in England were wearing wool. And this resulted in an inadequate supply of raw materials that they had to send to English paper mills. So in order, if you wanted to really have a Bible that was going to last and printed on quality paper, you had to import it from abroad. You can see this, by the way, as early as the Great Bible, because we remember that when Henry VIII wanted to print the Great Bible, originally the Great Bible started its printing in France because he wanted the best paper he could find. So it was much easier and cheaper for the Dutch, who had their paper at their disposal, to print it right there on their paper. And then it was for the English to have to import the paper from Holland at, of course, some sort of upcharge. Okay, now I'm going to share with you all of the characteristics of spuriously dated 1599 Genevas, so you can tell the difference right away. Okay, the 1599 Genevas that have the false dates, they all contain 2 title pages. There's the heart-shaped center, and Jeff, you can see if yours has one too. And the second title right behind it has only the woodcut of the Red Sea. But there are 2 general titles to all these 1599 Genevas that were imported. Both titles are incorrectly dated 1599, and they all claim to originate in London. All of the false 1599 Genevas are in Roman type. So you all have Roman type in there, and they all have the full set of illustrations of the 26 in-text illustrations and the 5 maps. So that's one way you can tell if you're looking for the real 1599 Geneva, you're not going to find it in Roman type. It's going to be in black letter. The 1599 Geneva Bibles do not contain an Apocrypha. It was included in the list of books, but it wasn't included in the actual text. All of the 1599 Genevas that have the fake titles also have a second title page to the Book of Psalms that looks like the picture on the right. And these 1599 Genevas have a metrical psalter bound in at the end, but there's no Book of Common Prayer in the beginning. And here's the true 1599 Geneva Bible. You have a title page that is not a heart-shaped center. You've got this nice architectural title. 1599. You've got text that is black letter text, no illustrations. And this particular $15.99, we had an inventory, but we sold it this week. So if you're looking to buy this one, sorry, it's gone. But we do have numerous $15.99s on our website popping up. Here are some good references if you'd like to study more about it. I would particularly recommend Charles Eason's little book, really good. I don't know how I did for time, Stephen, but I tried.
Thank you, Joe. First off, thank you. I appreciate this. I'm going to have to go back and study, but that's okay. Anyone have any questions for Joe as he is still around? And anything you'd like to go back or ask questions of, please do.
Yeah, Joe, I have a question. Now you mentioned there were 180 possible editions that were printed of the Geneva Bible. Sometimes I know people use that term editions in a different way. Sometimes it can be used as additional printings. How is this term used when you say 180 editions? Does this mean that there have been some changes in each one of these editions, or in some cases just reprinted at later dates?
Yeah, this becomes kind of a bit of a technicality, but the editions that I'm referring to are, you've got each page is set individually, right? So if you're printing a leaf of a Bible during that time, during the hand press era, you have 3 people at work. One person is setting all of the type on that page. Once they have the type set, they get all the wood in place to keep the block from moving. Then they run it through the press. And Carl, when they're doing this, they're running 2,000 copies of the same leaf, potentially more. We don't actually know. The 2,000 number is rather conservative. It could be more. But they're doing this for all of the leaves of this Bible. And they're doing this potentially of 500 pages, 500 different leaves. So you can just imagine the amount of paper that's just stacked up in their warehouse. That's an edition that we're talking about. So when they're removing the type, when they're done with those 2,000 copies and they remove the type and reset it for the next Bible the following year.
Maybe where the type itself is now used for another edition, but you might have changes, woodcuts or other things that are present in the other printing, correct?
Yes. So what you'll frequently see, Carl, is you'll see like there are a number of different typos, right? That misprints that we kind of look for as collectors. Sure. And that's what you're seeing. Yeah, you're seeing someone who typeset, and the next time, the following year, or whenever they set it again for a new edition, they mixed up a word. So now they have the Son of Jesus Church instead of the Son of Jesus Christ, or they put in a title page with the date of 1495 and instead of 1594. Yes, okay. So those are misprints that occur between all the different editions.
Gotcha. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Joe, I appreciate that. Was obviously relevant for me with I've had this $15.99 sitting around for a while going. I figure it was one of the imports, but so that was got a lot of good information from that. Just if quickly, I was trying to jot some things down and then got behind on a few things. Do you have any scriptural references for where you were omitting for some of the instances where you said in the pirated versions there were instances of a D instead of a TH?
I don't in front of me, but I can email you and give you a few places to check out. It depends a little bit between the versions. So what I would recommend you do, Jeff, is look at Ruth 1:1, figure out which version you have. And if you have a copy of Herbert's catalog, Herbert does a nice job there, I think, from Leah Wilson's work, really, at figuring out whether or not your copy is a later date or an early date, 1599 Geneva. And so what I mean by that is the early versions that I think were printed close to 1616, they're the most inaccurate. The later versions, the accuracy increases. And we actually have one particular variety of a 1599 where the colophon is dated 1636, but the other title pages are dated 1599. That one is the most accurate in terms of its textual translation and typography.
Okay, you said Ruth right then. Did you mean Esther or?
Yeah, I meant Esther 1:1. Thank you.
Okay, and well, that was my next question. What about Esther 1:1 is the, can I tell from?
Okay.
When I was writing some notes and I looked up and you advanced the slide from that, so I wasn't sure what you were referencing in that passage.
I am also a teacher by day, and I'm so accustomed to teaching a 50-minute lesson that when I'm told to reduce it down to 25 or 20 minutes, I get so stressed out and I just keep moving on, keep going, next slide. So let me find it for you. So 1599, I'm looking in Herbert's catalog. That's what I'm doing right now, Jeff.
Okay. Well, I'm going to Esther 1:1.
Okay. So what you want to do is you want to look at Esther 1:1, and there's a particular verse in there that you're going, or a specific set of words. At the end, it says 7 and 20 provinces. And what you have to do is you have to look at where 20 is TWEN on one line and TY on the next. That's the first question.
Yes.
Okay. So now we narrow it. This is also really fun when you're describing these Bibles, trying to figure out, okay, which one is this? So the next question for you is provinces, does it have a C in there or a V or a U in the word provinces?
It ends in CES.
And how about PRO and what comes after the O?
Oh, yes, in a V.
Okay. So you have Leah Wilson's number 5 of the series, which, let's see, was apparently printed at a later date. And then Herbert gives you a variety of different places where there are errors and which ones are also corrected.
Okay.
So what I can do, Jeff, is I can send you a list of this later.
I've got several Herb. I don't know why. Maybe it just haven't seen it in there. Or
Okay, so it is. You have Herbert 249.
Okay. Cool. I also have a 1679 folio King James with the Geneva notes. I just got back from a binder. I had gotten it without cover, but it was complete. It needed some page repairs. But do you have any? I was thinking the 1679 was the year that it did the 2 prints of that year, but you said, was it 1640?
42.
1 or 2? Okay. Do you have any additional references you could email me maybe? That
around that idea?
Well, no, just on any particulars on the Geneva, on these, the 1679 or any of the King James with the Geneva note printings.
Yes, sir. I'll send you.
Perfect.
Henry, you're still here.
Yes, I'm going to be leaving in a few minutes to head down and get the crab fest and eat my annual fresh crab out of the bay out here. So we're looking forward. So I may disappear in a few minutes, but it's interesting. I just got a message from a fellow and he says, do you know anybody that has any Geneva Bibles? So I'll send it back and I'll say, yeah, I'm looking at him. Very good. Enjoyed that.
Okay. Any other questions for Joe? I'm going to ask Allison to stop